What is up, everybody? My name is Brandon, and I'm coming back to you with another video. Today, basically, I'm just going to be going over some tips to help improve your drumline and rudimental drumming notation. So this video is going to be for the people I have in mind. Kind of the group is going to be basically band directors who maybe need to notate a cadence or something like that for your drumline, or anybody who wants to start writing some show books or just cadences, anything like that. If you have any sort of interest in those areas, or if you are kind of doing a job that requires you to do that, and you feel like maybe your music just doesn't look right, or there's something that just isn't laying correctly on the page, hopefully this will help you. And if you do feel like maybe your stuff looks fine, maybe you'll catch something in here that you didn't know about that might help you to improve and make your music just all the more readable, which is a big thing. All right, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and just jump in. The first thing that I want to go over here basically is just the notation. Here's kind of a notation legend. I'm working in Pages because I'm going to turn this into sort of a companion PDF that anyone can look at, sort of as a quick reference if you need. Starting off with the snares and just kind of going over some of the articulations that you'll see commonly on the snare drums. Of course, tap, buzz, notated with the little Z through the note here, the accent, rim shot. And let's stop there for a second. A big thing that I see that isn't a major point in this video, but I wanted to mention, is that your rim shots typically should have some sort of articulation on the note. So whether that is a marcato, housetop accent, whether it's just the regular accent, or even if it's something else, even if you're wanting like ping shots or something, put something along with your rim shots so that they have some sort of articulation distinguishing them from the rest of the notes. Just the X by itself, the X note head, doesn't really convey enough. I don't know. It's a lot of this is like just kind of psychological training for percussionists. We see just the X, and it can be maybe a little ambiguous, but we see the X with either an accent or a marcato, housetop accent above the note, and it just makes it all the more quicker, and it's the consistency that we need to succeed in what we're doing. Moving on here, stick clicks and rim clicks. This can be negotiable. It doesn't necessarily have to be that this is, that this treble E space here and the treble F line at the top, that's always going to correspond with stick clicks and rim clicks. The biggest thing is just that you're consistent in what you're doing, and if need be, throw in a little label, which jumping down here, you can see I've got some various labels that you can use just with a text box, add over the top of your notes, rim, on rim, rim click, or stick click, whatever you want. Using text boxes in percussion music is very common. It's something we're used to seeing, and if there's something that you maybe feel like needs any extra clarification, or just isn't explained very well, or just is inconsistent, adding in that little, just a little text box goes a really long way for kind of just perpetuating that consistency, and that's a big thing. Okay, the double hand. This is more going to be sort of like a visual effect. If you have something, the double hand doesn't really come up very often. So basically, it's just if you had a note that you could play with one hand, sometimes we'll throw in something where it's both hands at the same time on the on the drum. And again, that's usually just going to be kind of a visual effect. If you need like a big horns to the box at the very end of the show, and then it's like you got some big chord notes, so it's like blah 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 blah. You can kind of have both of those hands going at the same time. That's again, this is just kind of a special effect thing, but it does come up sometimes. A Z with a tied note going on to the next note here is going to be a buzzed roll. So a larger point later is going to be the going over just some of the different roll types that we have. A lot of times I think people who don't know any better will notate a buzzed roll when they actually want a what's called an open or a rudimental or a double stroke or a diddle roll. So just be conscious of that. If you want to put in a buzz roll, that's fine if that's what you're wanting, but don't conflate the Z articulation over a note with an open or rudimental roll, because that's not what you will get. Moving on here, just kind of putting some of this into context with double strokes and with rolls. A lot of this is pretty intuitive if you are familiar with your rhythmic abbreviation and with kind of this rhythmic shorthand that we get. Although, of course, a 16th note with a single slash through it could be played as right-left, right? If you want to get that 30-second note at the very end here in between, where this 16th or I guess 32nd would start and where this 8th note starts, right? There's a little 30-second note lying in between them. Percussionists and drummers, rudimental drummers will know that is, we're actually kind of trained and conditioned to just understand that that's going to be a double stroke pretty much anytime we see it. Obviously, this would be kind of like a tap drag into a long roll here. Moving on here, if you are not familiar with your rhythmic abbreviation and kind of all of that rhythmic shorthand, it might be a little confusing why I've chosen to notate with a single slash here, a double slash here, and a triple slash through the half note here. And if that is the case, if you are a little unfamiliar and don't quite know why I've made those choices there, then stick around, because roll notation and articulation selection is one of the things that I'm going to talk about later on in the video, which I've got time-stamped in the little chapter feature of the video. And just kind of closing the book on the snare drum notation here, this would just obviously be a double stroke, open, or rudimental roll. Those terms all basically mean the same thing. And let's move on to the tenor notation here. So tenor drums or multi-tenors or quints or quads or whatever you want to call them. In this case, I've notated for a set of 6 drums. If your school only has 5, you would actually omit the first Spock drum, that little piccolo drum in the middle. If you are only running quads, if you have neither of the little piccolo Spock drums in the middle, you would start here. And so this stays consistent. The drum 1, 2, 3, 4, all the notes in the staff will always be 1, 2, 3, 4, unless you are running like tritoms, in which case you would probably go down to a 4-line staff, and then have it be the spaces and still corresponding pitches, high to low, 1, 2, 3. A pretty standard way to notate crossovers is going to be with the little parentheses surrounding the note head. A crossover, of course, being when you have a drum you want to hit, but for whatever reason, you need to put one hand over the other hand, right? Happens very commonly in tenor playing. Be sure that whichever hand is doing the crossing over, okay, so in this case, it's going to be my right hand crossing over the left. Okay, here's my left hand. Right hand crossing over the left is the hand that gets the parentheses, okay? So the hand that is crossing over, the hand that is on top, is the hand that gets the parentheses. It can be kind of easy, even once you've been doing this for a while, it can be easy to kind of work yourself fairly quickly into kind of a mental, like, wait, wow, is it the one that goes over or the one that's being crossed over? No. The hand that is crossing over, the hand that is on top, gets the parentheses. Similar articulation, the Z, buzz, right? We see that that can basically be put on any battery percussion instrument. Rim shot, of course, gets the marcato accent again. The spank, which is a bit of an interesting note or timbre on the tenors, is basically where you play a rim shot on a drum, typically one of the larger drums, either your drum 3 or more often your drum 4. You hit the drum with a rim shot, and then you mute it, typically a 16th note speed or 16th note duration following the note. And so it makes this really cool kind of harmonic effect where the drum is playing the rim shot harmonic, that super high frequency timbre, and then it's just all of a sudden gone. That's basically what a spank is. Rim clicks on specific drums, right? So you can see here we would have a drum 2 rim click, and I've just notated with a text box a few different options here. You could say rim, on rim, or rim click, whichever one feels most good. Sometimes it's whichever one you have space to notate with. And then stick click again, as long as you stay consistent. It doesn't necessarily have to be the ledger A, the treble ledger A above the staff here to notate a stick click. It can be really whatever you want, as long as you're consistent and your notation, your text box, whatever you're using, is clear. Moving on to the bass drums. Let's start here. This is if you are running a 4 bass drum line. Your drums will go from largest to smallest, from lowest in pitch to highest in pitch. They'll go 4, 3, 2, 1 up the staff. Or if you are running 5 bass drums, it will go 5 largest, 4, 3, 2, 1. G above the treble staff is going to be your number 1, your smallest drum. Or if you're running 6 drums, which I didn't notate, because if you're writing for 6 drums, you probably already know this, or you've got some sort of notation figured out, you would actually go 6 underneath. So at the D space below would be your 6, your big old boy drum or girl. Or in between, your 5 would actually be on the F space, 4, 3, 2, 1, and up. So through there. A slash in the middle, so some like the rhythm slash that we see a lot of times in jazz notation is in the center, is the unison hit, right? So a shorthand for showing unison hits. Or I've got a notation example below. You can also just have the thirds building up, right? F, A, C, E, G, or F, A, C, E, whatever your line is, your number of players that you've got. You can also notate unison hits in that way as well, depending on the context of the music that's surrounding it. And we'll kind of get into that here in a second. Unison click. So on your rim clickers, the unison hit notation is basically just an X in the center, or you can have clicks on individual drums. That's kind of a cool effect to have. You've got just one individual person playing a click. Lastly, cymbals. Okay, so I've got the cymbals on a 1-line staff. This kind of shows that if you want to have a split cymbal part, which can create really cool effects, that you can do the cymbals. You could have cymbal 1 on the top. You could have cymbal 2 underneath, or you can, if you don't want to do that, or if you have unison hits, you can show both. Just by putting it in the single or on the line here. Again, this is kind of up for negotiation. If you want to only have one cymbal line and for whatever reason you like the look of just kind of taking the place of where the cymbal 1 is or the cymbal 2, that can be your consistent only thing. The line will quickly figure out that if there's only one note and it doesn't split, it's not like I would look at a cymbal part where every single note is on the over space here and just be waiting for my cymbal 2 part patiently when there is no part, right? We'll quickly figure out that there is, that it's all just unison hits. Crash choke notated as a short value note. So in this case, 8th notes, it could be 16th notes, right? However aggressively you want the crash. Think how fast can you actually crash and mute? Obviously you could use like a 16th note value. Expect for the cymbals to, come through and obviously kind of de-arm and just quickly surgically remove those arms because of the speed that you would have to crash and then mute those. Of course, the cymbals are sharp. They will chop straight through the arms, and they will fall over and drop in a cartoonish fashion. The cymbals will spin around and eventually stop. A sizzle, where you've got the two plates, you crash them and you keep them together. You can kind of imagine what that would sound like. It would be similar to kind of like a half open or a sloshy hi-hat sound, hi-hat on drum set, where you've got the two cymbals touching one another slightly, but not with a ton of pressure applied with the foot pedal. And if you hit those and they sizzled together, they kind of get that sizzle, sloshy sound. We can do that with cymbals as well, where we hit the two plates together, and instead of moving the two cymbals away from one another, we can hit those plates together and hold them with a little bit of pressure, not enough to create the hi-hat effect, but enough to kind of get that nice sizzle sound. And again, notated with the Z articulation. The hi-hat, an X note head with a plus sign. You could also put a staccato articulation on over the top of the note as well, if you want, just whichever one you prefer. And then the sizzle suck, the sizz suck, or the vacuum, whatever you want to call it, is the effect where we've got a sizzle, and then we bring the two cymbals back together, and they make a kashunk vacuum sound. A very cool effect. If you've never seen or never heard this effect, maybe you have heard it and didn't know how they were doing it, take a pair of crash cymbals, crash them together, and then, kind of have them making that sizzle sound, and then just pull it straight back, and then they will vacuum into one another and make a really cool, rhythmic, funky kind of hi-hat sound that is very cool, and I like to use in my grooves a lot. Here I've just notated that you can use sizzle suck in, just however you want to have however you want the note to end. You can end it however you want. So it can be quarter note, full quarter note, sizz suck. It can be an eighth note, sizz suck, or it can be a dotted eighth note into a 16th, sizz suck, before the next note. And then lastly, we've got a tap where you just take the two plates and ding them together. If this was the top of the cymbal, right, and this is the top of the other cymbal, you can take them and go ding, and they make, well, it wouldn't be that high. Well, I'm not going to get into cymbal pitches right now. Going on, let's skip over this. We'll come back to this in a moment. Here is where sort of the examples start. So here's my second tip for you. These tips are kind of going in descending order of importance. The first, obviously most important thing is going to be your notation. Getting your notation correctly will take you a very long way. Looking at this example, the absolutely second most important thing, have your stems going up, not down. Looking at this, I know that it's on the C space, the treble C space, so the stems should be going down. I don't care. Put them up. Just put them up. This is how we're used to seeing these notes. They should be facing up. The stems should be going up. And you can already see how much better that looks just with that one change. I've added in the stickings just to kind of further illustrate. This basically looks like drumline music here, right? Just by having the notes going up, the stems going up. And just remember, stems up, everything, always, pretty much all the time, pretty much without fail, stems up all the time. Obviously with the caveat being not all the time. I just have to throw that out there, but all the time, stems up all the time. The second point kind of bundled in with this, I wanted to do kind of a cheeky two points put together. In my setup, I have actually extended the height of the stems a little bit so they come up a little bit. I didn't really bother showing what it looks like with the shorter stems. When you put the stems higher up, the nice thing about this is if you have things like flams and with your roll notation here, it doesn't get as crowded. So if I do actually go back up to this, you can see I've got some flam notes. And these grace notes fit very nicely in here. They're not colliding with the beams or anything, even when I have these 16th note beams. So the long note heads do really help with that. The long stems do really help with that and getting that notation, just having it look really clean. So extending your stems a little bit, stems facing up. And then the last thing, which I, again, didn't really bother to notate, but just that I have my articulations here, these roll notation symbols are crossing at the top, what is that, line? The top line of the staff here. This is kind of up to personal preference. You could really put these anywhere as long, of course, as long as they're not colliding with the beams or with your note head. I just like the way that it looks. I think that gives a nice weight around where kind of your eyes are going. You can look at just the note heads. You can kind of stare straight down the middle and just catch all the information you need if you're just looking down the middle when you're reading, sight reading your music or trying to memorize your music. So I kind of like having it cross here. Again, if it's a 2/ articulation, I have the bottom slash crossing where the single slash crosses right over the top line of the staff, that F line of a treble staff. And then they just kind of build up from here. I think that just looks very nice. And then the last thing in this number 1 point here is put in some more articulations, right? So make sure just that you've got enough accents and the marcatos over your rim shots and obviously in spaces that make musical sense. But yeah, just add some accents. The music sounds bland and kind of dry when you don't add in those accents, or worse, the drumline will start adding in accents where they feel they should go, and that's going to lead to inconsistent everything. Basically, if the drumline starts kind of making up music as they go, that's just not ever going to be a good thing. Which is obviously different than discussing and making changes to music together during rehearsal, but that's not how it's going to go. If they get just a line of 16th notes, they're going to start making it cool, and you do not want a group of junior high percussionists making the music cool. Moving on here, roll notation. Let's talk a little bit further, kind of elaborate on the roll notation. You can actually, this is a good example here. You can see what it looks like when the 2 slashes don't cross, the bottom slash doesn't cross through the F line. That technically, let's zoom in. Yeah, so that's not actually crossing with the top line of the staff here. So I guess technically that is correct. That's not crossing with the note head or anything. So it is, I think, technically correct, but it just looks ugly. It looks so bad. So I like to have all of mine crossing at the top line of the staff. Okay, so what is the effect that you wanted here? You wanted it to sound, but what you've notated is right? That does not sound correct. So the first thing that you would want to change is, again, changing this Z articulation, this Z roll. This is going to give you a buzzed or a multiple bounce or a closed roll or concert style roll, or you could also call it an orchestral roll. And then coming down here, so here's the quick tip to getting your rolls and your double strokes figured out. Basically, what you're going to do is count the number of beams that are attached to the note that you're playing. In this case, we've got 1 beam attached to this note head and stem. And then we're going to count the slashes, okay, which we've got 2. Add them up. 2 plus 1, 3. That is giving this note and this duration a fill of, F-I-L-L, a fill of 30-second notes. So I'm adding 30-second notes in to fill up the space between the start of this 8th note and the start of this 8th note, or we could think the end of this tie, which would give us total notes here. We would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which would make this a 5-stroke roll. Sounds jiggity-gada. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. jigga-digga-da. Now this turns into top, jigga-digga-da, 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 ba. Okay, going over here, we've got how many beams? 0. We've got 3 slashes, which is 3. We're up to the 32nd note beam, okay? Tied to this note, which is going to turn this into 1, 2, 3, 4, blah, 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 blah. 17 total. This is a 17 stroke roll, a short roll combination. Up here, we've only got 2, right? So what we're doing is basically filling out this half note with 2 beams, blah, 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 thinking, 8th note is 1, 2 is 16th note. So what you're writing here is 1E and a 2E and a 3. Here what you're writing is filling out this half note with 32nd notes, and that's going to give the rudimental double stroke roll fill out that you are wanting for your drum line. Okay, here's the disclaimer to all of that. Obviously, that's not a hard and fast rule, but like 90% of the time, it'll be fine. And if you do make a mistake, it's more than likely that the drum line will kind of understand what you are going for. And hopefully they will ask you to clarify and say, is this what you meant? But obviously there's going to be that last little 10 or 5% of the time where it doesn't actually work out. And it also does get a little bit iffy when you are working in compound meters, in which case probably just try to stay consistent. And if it doesn't work out, try to find an example of a solo or of some music that was written in a compound meter that can hopefully you can work out, why is it written this way? What does it mean? Can I decipher the codes to get this to sound how I want it to? Or just ask a percussionist. You can comment on this video, of course. Ask your local percussion specialist or your good friend from college. They will love to hear from you. Hopefully that makes sense. Going back up to the top for the drag, right, the single double stroke, this still applies because we've got 1, 2 beams attached to this note head and stem, and then we're adding in an extra slash, right? That rhythmic shorthand comes up to the 32nd note, filling out this space. What's going on here? The next thing, point, tip, whatever you want to call it, is learn some rudiments. Have a basic understanding of some of the rudiments that you see. Obviously, you're not going to be an expert on every single, all of the 40 essential rudiments and the infinite number of hybrid rudiments that exist, but at least have a basic understanding of some of the most important and most common ones. So at the end of this, I'm going to include a list, kind of a bank of some of my most recommended and most popular rudiments that you see of the 40 essential, and a couple hybrid rudiments, just to hopefully bring your drumline into the 20th century a little bit. If your drumline isn't using hybrid rudiments, it's time. And you can see here, basically what I've done is instead of taking this passage, 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a, which would be sticked. If I just received this, I would stick it as right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. And now what I've done is gone in and added in double paradiddle, double paradiddle, paradiddle, diddle, paradiddle, diddle, paradiddle, paradiddle. And now the music is automatically more fun to play. It's easier to memorize. It's more challenging to your students if they are do not know any of their rudiments or don't know why they were told to memorize that stupid rudiment poster that's been hanging up in the back of the band room so that they would stop setting things on fire. I get it. Middle school band directors are busy. Hire someone to teach them about their rudiments, or educate yourself and tell them why they need to really learn their rudiments and understand them, and then put them into practice in something like this when you're writing for your students here. No more excuses. Stop treating the percussionists like they are zoo animals. That's your New Year's resolution. The last point here is not going to be included on here. Instead, it's something I want you to internalize and just check. Give yourself a little tattoo on your hand. Give yourself a little stick and poke on your hand. Say to yourself, measure numbers, okay? They need measure numbers for everything. Why are measure numbers not included on everything? I will never understand. How much ink are you saving in the long run versus the time spent saying, okay, so it's going to be 5 measures after letter D. Okay, is that the measure that goes blah, 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 blah? No, it's the measure that goes blah. Okay, look, it's the whole note. It's the one that has the whole note. No, I counted it. That's 4 measures. No, we're going 5 measures. No, we're going 4. No, put your finger on rehearsal D. Count back, count forward. 1, 2. Just put measure numbers, bold, legible measure numbers. You can see this is honestly maybe a little bit too bold. The reason for that being, if you want to do like a 50% and rotated landscape PDF reduction and laminate those and put those on a booklet for your drumline to take out into the field, as it were. You can do that and the numbers will still be legible. You may need to even size up the numbers a little bit, but just have nice, big, thick, legible, grand, wonderful measure numbers on every single measure. You will save so much time and heartache in the long run. Just do it. Just give yourself a little stick and poke tattoo, and then every single time you're writing music for anything, you'll glance at that at some point and say, oh, come on! Measure numbers. Right. Okay, so let's break down this example a little bit here. I've just kind of attached this underneath the notation guide here, just kind of give you something quick to look at. It also addresses a couple things that we didn't really have time to look at. Like flams. Flam spacing, the grace note spacing before your flams. Just make sure they're close enough to the note head. I used to do it to where where this flag of the 8th note is, to where it was basically pointing just to the left of the note head. I don't get that psychotic about it anymore. Just kind of keep the grace notes close enough to the notes, and use your best judgment. If it looks really big, really wide and kind of sloppy, you never know. That may kind of subconsciously translate into those way too open flams, and sloppy, bad timing on the flams. You never know. And also it's just kind of a headache to look at and to read. So, right, what rudiment is this? Flam, diddle, tap. What rudiment is that? We get right, left, right, left, left, an extra accent into what rudiment? We've got a flam with a diddle, tap. What rudiment? So you can just kind of see some of the things here. This is also kind of part of the final point as well, which is give them the stickings, right? And the stickings as well. Kind of obviously that kind of goes along with the rudiments, because the rudiments are rhythmic combinations, including stickings. I like to give stickings on everything. The worst that happens by doing that is basically that I have to spend a little bit more time doing it for the sake of clarity the entire year. And also, I'm only human. I'm going to make some mistakes, and hopefully someone will catch it and we can pencil that in. You're going to make mistakes when you're typing in RLRRRLRRRLRB. RLRRRLRRLLR. It's just going to happen. Something on this sticking notation that's also a little bit negotiable. You don't necessarily, and actually in some cases, I'm now leaning more heavily into not doing this. I still do it just because of habit. But you can put just a single letter to notate the doubles, or the diddles. I like to use the RR and the LL just for learning purposes. When you're trying to learn those stickings, sometimes what you'll do is just literally read the stickings straight down, and I find that to personally help me a little bit to have those doubles notated, but again, that's a little bit negotiable. However, let's move over here. On a roll, you would not notate every single stroke. Just put the starting hand and then the ending hand, and we will know that that is a 5-stroke roll. We would play RR, LL, R to get through this. And while we're talking about stickings, do not put stickings for the grace notes in your flams. Only put the sticking for the primary note. We will understand that that is supposed to be played little L, big R, or vice versa, or with a double stroke as in these cheeses here. Double cheeseburger. Let's see, what else? We've got the text box notating that this is a rim click. This is a right hand on left hand stick click them together, and then another rim click here. I didn't just wimp out and say, oh, they probably remember from literally 5 notes ago that that's going to be a rim click. Don't give them the benefit of the doubt. Just do it. Be consistent and be as clear as you possibly can in what you want all the time. Here's that both. We've got a buzz, a staccato buzz here with both hands. That would just be played as j, right? Some people call that a guj, or obviously, it has 1,000 different names, whatever it sounds like. Both hands together, j, and then we get accent, drag, blah, blah, blah. Moving on to the tenors here, we've got a little bit of a butterfly or an infinity, whatever you want to call this, with the crossover here. Blah, blah, blah. You can split up flams across different drums if you want, right? So left hand on that drum 2, right hand on drum 1. Nothing super crazy in this. And again, over here, you can see we've got the rim, right on left stick, rim as well. With the both, and then just going down the drums. Bass drums. This example is actually going to be written for only 4 bass drums, just for the sake of making it easy to look at here. So we start with the rim click, unison hit, all 4 bass drums, F-A-C-E, treble spaces, and then we go down. I've got all of the stickings written in. Shun, 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 shun. And then you can see we build back up, and instead of notating this as just with a slash, I've actually notated this as just like the full thirds chord here, like you would kind of see. And the reason for that is I think that makes it a little bit easier for your eyes to kind of track, and for bass 1 to see, oh, I got a note coming up, rather than just having this change. If you are kind of layering in and staggering these bass drums entering here up and, accenting into this hit, I think it would look kind of strange to just have all of this visual build be kind of undermined and just have a unison rhythm slash put in here. Again, though, you would not be incorrect by doing that. And, you might even argue that this looks stupid. Bass 1 is going to miss their note. But, However, here we do have the rhythm slashes 1, and then look, another one of those visual clarity things here I have added just for the sake of making sure that bass 1, this can kind of look a little bit strange sometimes. If you want bass drum to play shop jiggity dum bum bum bum, right? Bass 1 would play all of these notes, but just by giving this, these extra note heads in here along with the unison hits, it kind of gives them an extra little reminder, and I think visually the line looks a little easier to read, and you could even give them the extra notes here. Or you could notate it like over here where the chord is kind of being stacked up, if that makes sense. Lastly, let's jump down to the cymbals, right? We've got unison sizz suck over the space of a full beat of triplets, 8th note triplets. We split off. The cymbals have the little tail showing us that we want to let these vibrate. So even though this is a 16th note, it's got the little let vibrate tail shorthand here. And then we get cymbal 1, cymbal 2, cymbal 1, cymbal 2 playing a same but displaced rhythm, and then just a unison hit. All of these have accents. the sizzle suck have the appropriate articulations over the note to kind of to show that open close hi-hat sound. And another thing, just kind of a small thing, for drum music in general, I think it's a little easier to just read the notes. By the nature of drums, we hit the note, and generally it's probably going to ring as long as it wants or as short as it wants, in the case of some of this battery stuff. So typically what I like to show is using rests, right? So I could have also shown this as a 16th note tied to a dot, or excuse me, a 16th note tied to an 8th note here. But instead I've chosen to put the rest in. I think just by the nature of that just shows hit the note and continue counting. Sometimes when you get a little fancy with your ties and your longer note values, like for example, if I want the drum line to just play one note at the beginning of the at the measure, and they just have a unison hit, everybody, I'm going to notate that as a quarter note, quarter rest, half rest, right? Rather than just giving them all a whole note. They will get confused. I know it sounds crazy. They will get confused and think that that is supposed to be a roll, or that they're supposed to do something weird, or something. You never know. Even at the college level, you kind of like, you've got all this stuff going on, and then it's like you see a whole note and you're like, what is that? What am I supposed to do there? Is that supposed to be a roll? It just happens. So just give them, in general, just a nice, short, easy to read note value, and use rests to fill up the space horizontally. I think works a lot better than using either tied notes or long note value in general. Well, I think that's everything. Hopefully this helps. Hopefully you can now go forth and give your drumline some better looking, betterly legibly, goodly, musically for you today. I thinkly that is where Leon